I,
Right as the button's going live.
I know we were talking and she clicked live and here we are. Well, hi everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to Healing the Whole Body podcast. I'm Sherri and this is Becky and I got Instagram going. So, how was your weekend? You had a long weekend. Everyone had a long weekend. We had a holiday.
We did have a holiday. It was a long weekend. It was a case of 3-day weekend because of that holiday on Friday, and so my Monday was extra Monday-y.
Oh, I'm
I don't even
sure.
think that's a word, but we'll make it one.
You had a Monday on a Monday, huh?
Oh boy, it wasn't. It was. It,
Yeah,
it definitely was.
oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. Those 3-day, 3-day weekends are fantastic, right? Until it comes Monday and then you get back to reality and everything. But yeah, no. I we were talking today like we talk most every day and we were talking about how food and binging and holidays and how it's just this very bad spiral or cycle. I don't know what other thing to use, but I don't know. What are your thoughts about? Well, and I just said as she clicked the button to go, was it seems like every holiday we have it is literally food centric, right? That is the main
Yeah.
theme of the holiday. And if you stop and you pause at that, it's like, really? We just had July 4th. And what advertisements do you hear surrounding the 4th of July, food wise?
Food, grilling, barbecuing, which isn't bad, but everything is, it's such a processed food holiday, just almost like Valentine's Day, right? I get we should end up and love each other, every day, but do we really need a holiday that's revolved around, nothing but junk food essentially?
Hmm.
And to me that's the difference in holiday intentional enjoyment versus binging behavior for holidays. And that's kind of the where we were going, with tonight's topic in regards of when every holiday turns into this food spiral, because people of addiction, and Coach Sly's great about talking about it, the addiction and the recovery side of things, because in my opinion, and we'll take your side and my side with this, because there's two difference, right? So I may have had food that I, normally wouldn't have, or, but I was intentional with it. Granted, intention involves choices, right? So my choices weren't necessarily optimal, and you and I just had this conversation that a lot of my choices led to some water weight gain.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't call what I did a binge. And that's where, how do you
Yep.
decipher between, intentional enjoyment for the holiday, right? I'm pretty, on point, strict with food, but there are times where I end up and I have, a food that I normally wouldn't. And I'm trying not to, call foods out, because anyone that does have an addiction or a binge side, sorry, the ring camera's going off here. Um, I don't want them to be triggered, but how do you decipher? So I have my terms, and I'll go into that, but how do you decipher between intentional splurge, if you will, or intentional choice, I guess is how, because that intent, again, involves choice. How do you decipher between that choice and a binge behavior?
I think a question you have to ask is, are you always, quote unquote, starting over after a holiday? I think that kind of answers the question. Did you binge or did you, you know? have a little bit like you did. You had a little bit. You didn't binge, but if you're always starting over after a holiday, that's kind of a red flag.
Well, and that's just it. What I had was there was a lot of choice in it, but I was also very present and in the moment of it, right? I wasn't
Mhm.
mindlessly walking past like a friendly gathering and, eating food to the point where I couldn't stop. That's my difference in what a
Mhm.
binge is I'm present, I'm aware, I'm enjoying it, whatever I choose to end up and have, right? But I stop. So I may end up and have, one piece or one, whatever, but I'm not on this cycle that involves, yes, I ended up and, start over, but it's a different type, I guess, of starting over. And it's not like I'm consuming that food for a dopamine hit and an escape and,
Mm.
suppression aspect, right? I'm very aware of what I am doing, and it's not a impulse. It's not a, chaotic or unwanted volume aspect. I don't have this feeling of being out of control, I guess is how I will put it.
Right.
I'm not zoning out watching television, mindlessly eating a bag of chips, or I know I said I wasn't going to end up and mention food, but you know, I'm not doing that, right? So I'm not using it to numb or avoid something or get a false sense of dopamine.
Yeah.
Um, it's a case that I'm very aware, right?
Yeah.
I pause, I do my normal thing, right? But
Well, and I think too, a lot of people, the anticipation of the idea of indulgence um, kind of activates the dopamine in your brain. And then it kind of leads some people to down that binge like, oh, it's a holiday, and oh, we're having this gathering, and oh, all the food that's being brought in, and you start looking at that anticipation and that excitement of the dopamine. But if you think about it, our holidays really are based around food. And it's almost, if you're not intentional, you could definitely be, it could definitely set you up for failure.
mhm. Oh, absolutely. And now we have, almost a holiday every month where before, people may end up and struggle with like Thanksgiving and Christmas and,
Yeah.
get right back on track for the New Year's. But now we end up with, Valentine's, St. Patrick's Day, Easter,
Yep.
almost one every month, right? And it's just this constant repetitive action where then people will enjoy summer and they're going to the lake or they're going to birthday parties or they're it's like everything revolves around food, and we get away from the aspect of the people, right? And we we are in a case of we focus too much what's on our plate instead of making the meaningful memories that are beyond the food, right?
Yes.
um, Going for a walk, playing yard games, going to the lake, whatever these other memories are that people can end up and make. It's all about what food am I going to take? What, you know, potluck and all of this, right? So, and desserts and blah 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 blah, right? So that's one of the ways also to end up and break this is focusing on the people and not necessarily on your plate. And we'll give several other strategies, but for those that are watching, whether you're over on Instagram or whether you're here on YouTube, um, comment how did your holiday go? How did you have any issues with binging or having foods that you typically wanted? Um, because the other side of it is that I hear a lot from clients, it was more, my grandma celebrated, or my grandma, creating it. Many of us were raised in traditions, and so breaking those traditions is hard for people, because they're like, I always, especially the bigger holidays, right? They end up, and, well, my grandma did that, or my grandma made this, or we always had that at Thanksgiving, you know and so that will end up and create it too, because they're trying to connect again with those childhood memories, and be people pleasing, because, oh, Aunt Mabel likes this special salad. But I think also people come from a place of depleted. So many times we are so depleted that we're looking at those false stimulants, whether it be the sugar, whether it be the alcohol, whether it be the rich, savory foods on the table. We're looking at all of those instead of what our body truly needs.
Right. Right. Well, and just, you know, and I experienced this when I just went home here recently. And not necessarily my parents, but I was around my cousins and I would get, "Oh, can you have that?"
Mm.
I got a lot of that question. And it's like, well, I mean, I can. I choose not to because I am very focused on my health journey. Now, did I splurge when I went home? I did. And that was huge for me. In fact, it was so huge that I sent you pictures of what I splurged on because it was so out of the norm for something that I do.
Hmm.
But the splurge didn't derail me. The splurge didn't I didn't fall off the wagon and go, "Oh my gosh, I gotta start over like when I get home." Um, it was right back to it. Had the splurge, the next meal was right back on track. Um, it has taken me a long time to get to that point. I don't know if some of our followers remember a couple years ago when I went to Cookie Bake. So my best friend and I and a couple other ladies, we get together and we spend a weekend baking cookies. And we're not talking about, oh, we make a little bit of cookies. We have 5 stand mixers running the same dough, and we're mixing up, I don't know, I think we figured out something like 10 different batches of cookies of this. I mean, like, unless you see the pictures, it is incredible. Well, I went into it, I ate great. And I decided on the last day when we put the cookies out on the platter and everything that I was going to have her grandmother's sugar cookie recipe. It's delicious. I had it and I went off the rails and couldn't stop. And I ate way way too many of those sugar cookies. I couldn't stop. And so I know that I had to be an abstainer. And here recently, I've been able to shift that, to have that bite, to savor that bite, and then go, I had that pleasure for the moment, but it's not enough to derail me. But I'm 4 years into my healing journey. Like, it's taken me a long time to get there. So, I just think people struggle with that, like you said, "This is oh, grandma made that, you don't wanna upset grandma." And it's like, "You know what? I think grandma loves me, and grandma wants me to be healthy." Um, and I'm good for now. I on social media Friday, I went on Instagram story and told people to give yourself permission to say no, thank you.
Which
Be-
is the biggest part, because a lot of people will feel that guilt of, they made this, and I feel as though I need to eat it, or I need to sample it, or whatever, and it does end up and create this feast cycle, if you will.
Yeah,
And like I said, that to me is the difference in intention and binging.
yeah,
Because again, when you are unable to stop, like where you were just kind of in this out of control, right? You maybe not weren't quite zoning out, but you just really found it hard to end up in control. That's where it's a binge. And that's why, it ends up and it matters, because for many, like you said, people are using that food to disconnect from something, right?
Well, yeah, and don't you think people use it, and I mean, I can look at myself in the past, I'm sure you can too, before we went down this healing journey, that we would look at holidays as an excuse to eat and drink what I wanted,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know? And,
Well, but that turns in from going from the holiday, right? Whether it be, for instance, we'll use 4th of July, right? Um, the holiday was Friday, but then it turned into Saturday, and then it turns into Sunday, and I'll start again on Monday, that type of mentality. Or same thing with Thanksgiving, right? Which is on Thursday. And then, well, but, I end up and I'm going shopping and I'm still, but then you also have families that, for instance, we have my side of the family, my husband's side of the family, and, there's multiple gatherings. And so then it's all tied to food, right?
yep.
And so then you have it not only once, but you have it the second time. It's just this whole cycle that a lot of people, as I've told my clients with holiday, right? If you're going to end up and make a intentional choice to have an indulgence or to have a, food of choice, um, set it, choose your day. Like, I can go to, my family side and be on plan, right? I, like you said, give myself permission to say, I'm going to, um, I'm going to pass on that because, or whatever.
Mhm.
Typically, we do like a buffet line, so people don't even really have a clue what the heck I'm eating anyway. But, make that choice where maybe on my husband's side, I'll, have something that I normally wouldn't. And that's, again, is making that intentional choice to not let it turn into a whole, weekend long celebration.
Well, I think there's that fear of missing out trigger that we fall into that trap of, oh my gosh, there's that urgency of I'm going to miss out if I don't have, Aunt Susie's blah, 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 or I'm not standing around with everyone with a drink, an alcoholic beverage in my hand. The fear of missing out triggers in the brain. And most of the time, nobody's paying attention to what you're eating and drinking. If they are, you have to come up with plans on how to deal with that ahead of time.
Yeah. And that's where no one really cares, right? It's all in your body and how you're perceiving the whole situation, right? um Typically, though, the behavior and that role, there's something internal. Maybe that's hormones that, or misaligned eating, right? A lot of gatherings happen late in the evening. Maybe you're someone that doesn't eat late, but it's this emotional trigger because, like I said, a lot of um, this mindless or this binge happens late at night,
Mhm.
which typically you're sitting in front of a TV or you have lights on, you're being blasted with artificial light, creating this cortisol issue. So again, you're misaligning those hormones, leptin, insulin, ghrelin, all of those end up and lead to impulse eating if they're misaligned. And so that spiral starts, and like I said, it's hard to end up and come out of. But you also disconnecting and looking at food as, it's not a reward signal, right? It's not a, oh, I was good, or I did all this, so I deserve a treat, right? We're not animals. You don't need a, you know
Yeah.
treat. And not to say again that you can't have it, but again, if you have it, get right back on track. You're not broken. Your brain isn't looking for some type of artificial relief from whatever you're dealing with. It's just there's something there that you need to end up and just kind of look at food as nourishment and get right back on track. And that's one of the easiest things that I will tell people too. If you know that you're going to a gathering and there may not be food, preload. End
Yeah.
up and eat before you go. Whether that's eating, a steak or eating whatever, animal protein, getting that in, getting minerals, getting hydration, because again, many times our body, when it's also dehydrated, has cravings as well. Um, so there's this false sense of hunger when we're actually dehydrated. So, getting that extra hydration, getting some minerals in there will end up and help before you go into some of these events as well.
Well, how many conversations or meetings have you and I been in the BNC community? And people have said, "Oh, I'm going to X, Y, and Z." And they are like utterly terrified. What do I eat? I'm going to a wedding or I'm going to, and you and I both, and I believe Coach Sly's done it too. We've all said, okay, like you said, you preload, you eat before you go. What can I take? Well, I don't go anywhere. In my purse is always beef sticks, um, carnivore crisp, some super chews from Power Fit Foods. I am never without carrying something to eat. When we go work out on the property, guess what? I've got that stuff with me. Um, because I'm never going to get into that situation where I'm caught where I'm starving and I've got nothing to fall back on. And now all of a sudden I have to indulge in whatever it is because I'm starving, right? So, couple things you could do is pre-decide ahead of time one or two items that you are going to indulge in, a scoop, like a little scoop. And instead of scarfing it down, savor it, right? Because isn't there, what is that, where the first time you taste something versus the second and third and fourth? Yeah. What is that? Do you remember?
The
I know, right? Ugh,
I know, yeah, we literally just discussed it at
I
Hack Your
know.
Health last year too, during a whole presentation. Um, but yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I can't think of the word.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a whole mental side of that. And really, wasn't it, then they say like 2 bites
Hmm.
is
The
really,
the
or three.
they use chips for instance, right? When you have the first three bites of chips, you're tasting the salt. After that, you end up and you stop tasting it.
Yeah.
You're just mindlessly eating at that point.
Yeah, yeah. You also want to ask yourself, is the future me going to thank me for this? Right? Because when you get there and you're like, oh, forget it. Oh, screw it. I'm just going to indulge and go overboard because I want to, but then afterwards you don't, you didn't really think about it enough beforehand. You didn't put a place or an action in mind. What do I mean? Journal. Set in a different chair than what you always do. Use a smaller plate. Little tricks like that to help yourself when you are trying that. Also, don't try and be perfect, but again, you have to know if you're an abstainer or a, what's the other one?
Moderator.
Moderator. You have to know that about yourself. And knowing that if you have a one off moment, it's not a one off month.
Right.
Yeah. And food. isn't bad. Food is what sustains us. And the people around me, it's really what I'm after, right? To spend the time with. And so pause before eating, inhaling, that reboots your nervous system. Again, practice the different responses. Oh, here, have a second helping of grandma's, blah blah blah, and have that response ready to go. And it can be in love. It doesn't have to be, rude or anything like that. Um, Instead of the second helpings, go for a walk. Like, hey, I'm going for a walk. Who wants to go with me? Set new rituals or new things that help combat that. You would be surprised how many people would probably end up going on a walk with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and that's why I said, doing something right that is going to end up and honor your body or honor your system versus just sitting there, continuing to eat, right? But also on the other side of that is not labeling food as good or bad,
Yes.
right? Because a lot of times guilt and restriction lead to binging. So when people will end up and say, well, I can't have that because that's bad, or even flipping that and going internal, right, of, well, I was so bad this weekend that that just creates this guilt. So whether we're talking about food as good or bad food, or whether we're talking about ourselves as good and bad, we need to practice this different language. I hear it all the time in the dietary camps, if you will, labeling food as such, right? Again, look at it, like you said, look at it. Man, it's a Monday. Looking at it from a place of nourishment, right? Is this going to nourish me? Is this going to end up and fill me? Am I going to, be hungry in 2 hours because I'm eating this empty caloric food, right? Or is this going to tide me over for the next 4, 5, 6 hours, right? So really, again, looking at it from that standpoint, but also from the body standpoint, because if you end up and internalize and look at the fact of I was bad, or guilt or shame, or any of these other emotions, the body's going to end up and hold on to that, and it's going to rewire the brain, to the point where the next time, right, um, it's going to happen again. And so, in order to rewire and break this identity, you have to stop saying, I always binge on the holidays, or, I was so bad and I was so guilty, because guess what happens? You're going to end up doing it. But start learning to enjoy the holidays without food controlling me. I'm going to make intentional choices that is going to nourish my body, and I will feel good this afternoon, not, passed out on the couch because you're in a sugar coma.
Right. Well, and I'm going to go deep here for a moment. Cravings really are actually um hidden for deeper desires, such as like comfort and celebration, connection. When you start decoding what you're really hungry for, the food loses its false authority, if that makes sense. It no longer hold. It's like I'm really after hanging out with my friends and family and chatting and so forth, and I miss that connection because we only get together so every so often. um well, that's different. That's a different type of craving. That's not about food, right? And so um you can rewrite those scenarios and those scenes and everything. I sit I've been doing this a lot lately. I've been people watching when we go out, and when you start people watching in restaurants, and we actually went out to a restaurant this weekend, and we were sitting there, and my husband and we don't have our phones out. Um, Very rare do we pick them up while we're sitting there eating, but we start kind of people watching. And, this was a nicer steak uh, house that we went to Saturday night. And watching people mindlessly eating the bread that they put down on the table, and playing on their phones and not conversing, and it's like, wow, that's
Mhm.
is you look over here, and there was, I don't know, there must have been like 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 kids, 3 adults. The adults were literally on the opposite ends of the table, like, talking loudly to each other, and all of those kids were on a device. All of those kids were looking down on a device,
So
and
disconnected.
so disconnected with their environment, their food, and it was like, "Oh, that's what we've kinda turned into for a society." Now, where does that circle back to holidays and things like that? That goes back to the traditions, right? I mean, I'm sure you have traditions from when you were a kid, and, which are different now as an adult with your own kids, but we still long for those type of, um
Again, it's the childhood memories.
yes. Yeah,
And that's where creating different memories, right?
yeah,
Um, because yeah, a lot of the holidays where you had kind of talked about Christmas turns into more of a monetized holiday. Getting back to, my mom and I have this discussion a lot because, she's going to be 80 this year, and my kids are old enough that if they need something, they have jobs, they go and, get it. And so we don't need gifts, we don't need things sitting around the house, but getting together and, maybe it's sitting at the table playing cards, or, just talking, right? Not necessarily, like you said, sitting at a table playing on a device, but we've we've got together the last time, and we played, phase 10, we played Uno, we play, we made memories like that versus those related to food. And we use it a lot in the BNC community, or with our clients, the acronyms, right? Coach Sly will talk about HALT.
yeah,
Are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? Are you tired? Why are you reaching for food? It's definitely a helpful tool that helps with that emotional side of binge eating, and breaking that pattern. I have a few other ones depending what, if it's someone that is eating because of stress, going through, like the whole calm, is this craving? Is this again that emotional attachment? Are you lonely? Is there mental fatigue? Are you looking to actually feed yourself, or are you feeling frustrated, emotional? Because a lot of times if we get frustrated, we go and we grab food, right? Or if we're emotional, if we're sad, if someone's made us mad, right? You'll hear people talking about when they're emotional, they go and grab, a container of Ben and Jerry's or something, or escaping, right? So it's feed is the word, but it's frustrated, emotional, escaping, or disconnected. And so there's ways to really work on breaking this trend, or breaking a binge cycle, taking those breaths, speaking your words, right? Whatever that word is that resonates with you. Um, and then realizing, what is it that is, are you actually hungry? And then eating if you are truly hungry. But that just helps with stopping that mental monkey mind, putting a halt to it, realizing, reconnecting, being present, and then making a choice.
right. Well, and so I have a birthday coming up. We are going out to eat. We're going out with friends. I selected a Brazilian steakhouse on purpose, right? Because I know that I can eat and I can eat well, right?
Mhm.
But it again, even though we're celebrating my birthday by going out to eat, it's really the people I'm choosing to be around for my birthday. And my birthday is not, I'm a lack of a better word, important enough to binge. M- my healing journey is stronger than my one birthday coming up, right? That one, like, I promise that dessert's gonna be there. I promise that right, whatever, mac and cheese or whatever's on the, you know, or they put down the little rolls, the Brazilian roll things that are delicious. Um, and it's funny because I have my husband trained at this point. He picks the basket up and moves it over clear on the other side of him because you don't realize the mindless eating that you do. But I mean, this has been years and I've trained him for years now, so he just moves that on the other side. But my birthday is about spending time with my godson and, his dad and my husband and myself. I'm excited for that. We don't even really have to go out to eat. It really doesn't matter about that. In fact, I really don't care about my birthday. I'm at that age, but it's still an example of what in my life is stronger, and the healing journey is stronger than having the cheesecake or the tres leches or whatever it is that it's set in front of me. I'm going to have steak. I'm going to have probably a lot of steak and I'm going to be happy and that'll be the end of it.
Mhm. Well, and that's just it. I mean, good choices can be made no matter where you eat, right? Most places have a burger, most places have steak, most places have a salad. We went out to eat Saturday. I had stopped thinking my days. Weekend all turned into one. We went out to eat on Saturday. Of course, it's beginning of July, so I ate a salad, and it's things like that. Um, you have the choice to make, right? You can go out, not saying that you have to be, fully carnivore and eat at a Brazilian steakhouse. There's
Right.
a grilled asparagus or there's broccoli. I mean, I seen your plate that you ate the other day.
Hmm.
Um,
I
so
did.
there's choices that you can end up and make. Or maybe you do a little bit more carbs and get just a baked potato or sweet potato or whatever the case may be. There's choices that can end up and be made, but typically when you are mindlessly eating or you are binging, it is because you're coming from a place where you feel dysregulated, right? You're either seeking that dopamine hit, you're seeking something that is going to make you feel safe. Maybe that, again, it's a childhood memory. Maybe that's, whatever. Maybe you're just simply overstimulated. We have so
Hmm.
much going on in our lives nowadays that binging often also comes from overstimulated, because whether you're overstimulated in crowd situation and you're mindlessly eating walking past, or whatever the case may be. So there's things that you can do. You mentioned going for a walk. You can go do some box breathing, sit in the bathroom and do a few rounds of box breathing, or I always, when I go somewhere, I'm always carrying a cup with me, and it has my electrolytes in it.
Hmm.
Again, electrolytes, minerals, all of that, prioritizing that is going to end up in help. I usually have that cup and my hydrogen water bottle when I
Yeah.
travel. It's
Yep.
just a given for me.
Yep.
So, cravings are often just the sign that we are deficient, but it's not necessarily that we're deficient in sugar. It's, that's a desire, right? You desire the sugar, but the craving is because you are deficient in something, and that can even be on the smaller level as far as minerals go. When you know your body is seeking that, and so you're craving, right? um in order for it to get it. But
Well, we've lost touch with knowing what we want, knowing what our body is really after. Like you said, are you really just dehydrated? Um, there's times where it's like, oh, I have this headache, and I realized it's probably because I need some magnesium and some potassium and I will get my electrolytes, and I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, that was the problem. I needed the electrolyte. And what was it? You and I laugh because when we make our coffees, we both put our electrolytes in our coffee, and we call it our salty coffee. And we both actually, like now, if I go somewhere and have a coffee, it doesn't taste good because it doesn't have my electrolyte, my salty coffee. Isn't that funny? Where 2 years ago, I'd have been like, "Ooh,
you're
who's
doing
putting
what?
salt in your coffee?" But yeah. So yeah, it's a change of alignment. It's, you can honor your heritage without abandoning your healing.
Yep, absolutely. And meet those real needs, not just a craving. And so, you know, the urge is going to come up, but being able to pause, reflect, and really look at what you're doing. What is the system asking for, right? Are you
Mhm.
tired? Because sometimes people, aren't getting enough sleep, and that will lead to overeating, or this poor food choices. um what is it that you can do that is going to end up and be just as supportive to the system? Journal.
Right.
There's choices out there. Walk, journal, um a cup of herbal tea, maybe. It- are you seeking warmth? Are you seeking comfort? um what is your ritual around food, or around meals? Creating gentle rituals instead of harsh rules. Again, that kind of goes back to the aspect of, food's good or bad, right?
Mhm.
Looking at that, because you got to be able to send the body the signal that I am nourished and I am safe, right?
Mhm.
Not rush through eating, not, um, eating on the go. I mean, I can't tell you how many people you had talked about going out to the property and having things in your purse, but how many times are people failing to plan, right?
Right.
Fail to plan, plan to fail.
Right.
Um, and they're going through drive-throughs. They're, which, okay, I get, right? There's times where I'll go through drive-throughs too. I'm not perfect, but we end up and we still, it's almost that like 90-10 rule, right?
Right.
um 90% of the time you got to be making those good choices, because there are going to be times where it's going to happen, but be intentional when it does happen.
Well, what was it? How many? It was a couple weeks ago. I was talking to you. I was heading out to the property, didn't make breakfast. I was hungry. I stopped at McDonald's. And what did I order? I
The
ordered
round eggs and ham,
sausage, yeah,
sausage,
ham. And
one
then,
or the other.
well, one day it was sausage, the other day was, yeah, like, and it was cheaper than ordering an Egg McMuffin and pulling the
Mm-hmm.
muffin off.
Muffin off. Yep.
Yeah, and that's what I had. And it's funny because I for the longest time, it was like, "No, we can't go eat there." And now I've learned enough to go, I'll find something to eat.
Yeah.
Like you said, a salad, fresh cracked pepper, pour it on. Like I love that. Bring out some olive oil. So, there are ways of getting around that kind of That there was one restaurant, there was one. I went with when I was visiting my parents, and it was a Chinese restaurant. And I thought, "Oh, I can find something." And they literally did not have anything. Like, it was like, it was crazy because I kept like, "Well, you have shrimp. Can I get that grilled?" "I don't know. Let me go check." And the poor guy would go back to the kitchen. He's like, "No, we just have it breaded." And I'm like, "Okay, let's try." And you know what? That time I chose not to eat,
Yeah.
and I was okay with that. And everybody else enjoyed themselves, and I was fine with literally. I had some tea.
Yeah.
I drank tea. And so, um, but it wasn't, I didn't have that fear of missing out because we were all going out to eat. We were taking my daughter back to the airport because she was leaving. But I know I think she was a little annoyed at me that I didn't. But she hasn't been around me enough because she lives in another state to understand how I'm eating. So, yeah, I think I annoyed her a little bit, but I'm her mother, so I think that's normal.
Well, and I think that's where many people are afraid to ask, right? They're afraid
Yeah.
to ask those questions if you go out and eat. Can you make me, a plain chicken, or don't put the sauce on, or can I just get that, sautéed instead of fry, those type of things. They're so afraid to end up and ask because they don't want to be an inconvenience, right? Where
Yes.
in reality, if they just, I mean, people are used to that. People have, food sensitivities all the time. People
Mhm.
are allergic to different things all the time. Do I think that there's a correlation between those two and, what many people are doing with their lifestyles? Absolutely. But that's a whole nother podcast in
Right.
itself. But don't be afraid to end up and ask, because many times the kitchen is very accommodating, right? They're not going to want someone to have issues with what they're consuming.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, a a couple years ago, my mom's like, "Well, you can ask them for that?" And I'm like, "I can ask them for anything I want. I'm paying." Right? Like, this is if they can't accommodate me, they're not getting my money. And, give me, a Mexican restaurant. A Mexican restaurant to me is one of the easiest places to eat.
Yeah,
I think you've said
absolutely.
it too, right?
Absolutely, because I can end up and find, several choices
Yeah.
at at a Mexican restaurant, whether it's, the fajita skillet, or carne asada, the steak, if you will,
Mhm.
you know, the El Pastor street tacos, right? The meat out of
Mhm.
them. Um, yeah, there's definitely choices. And the biggest thing, I know you had said, you're 4 years into this. I'm basically 6 years into this.
Mhm.
And there's still times where, choices come up that aren't right, but we're able to get back on track. And the
Mhm.
healthier we become, those foods no longer start to satisfy the same way,
Yeah.
right? They start to end up and taste different.
Yes.
So you start to end up and see it for what it is, Chem- chemical shitstorm, if you will. Right? It's not what the label ends up and portrays it to be, or what the menu portrays it to be, right? This delicate dish of whatever. Um, yeah, it's truly not. And there's been times where I've gotten something and taken a few bites, and it's like, because I wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily fully thinking about what I was ordering, and I was doing more of the mindless thing. So that's why I said be very intentional with what you're eating, because if you end up and really let your mind or your memories of what that food tastes like, or what that food connection was, it's not always going to end up and be the same thing, and you potentially can set yourself up for disappointment too.
One of the so I love this, and I'm gonna have you repeat this. You'll remember it when I get going here. So early on in my journey, when you and I first met, one of the things that I'll never forget you saying was how to order Starbucks. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Vi-
And it was like, "Wait, what? They put what in the coffee?"
oh,
Yeah.
the sugar water.
Sugar water.
Yeah.
Mm,
So a lot of your tea places, your smoothie places, your, coffee places, that's how they keep you addicted to their coffee, right? They'll end up and they'll push some sugar water. So even like when I go and get, my toffee milk tea, which instead of milk I get heavy cream, but it's at one of the places that my daughter likes to go to. I'll get English toffee tea, which is a leaf tea, but then I get heavy cream and it's an iced tea. But I have to tell them all the time, right? I don't want the little boba popping ball sugar things in it. I don't want the sugar water in it. I just want the tea and I want heavy cream and I want ice. That's all I want. But yeah, I do the same thing at Starbucks. It's like, no, I just want the coffee. I
yep,
just want the heavy cream.
yep,
And, if I splurge and get the sugar free, syrup, then
right.
so be it. But,
So be it. And
uh,
usually that's to me anymore, I can't even handle that.
yeah,
Yeah, remember that one I went to, what was it, about 2 months ago?
yeah.
And it took me 2 days to drink it because I kept watering it down and, like, I was so stuck. I should have thrown it out, I didn't, but I kept, like, watering it down and because I had gotten the sugar-free syrup in it, and it was
Mhm.
like it was so ba oh gosh, you remember that, Becky? I was dying
Yeah, I
for 2
do.
days,
I
yeah. But by gosh, I wasn't wasting my money, but it took me 2 days to drink it and really water it down and get it, and I won't make that mistake again. But yeah,
right.
sugar water, like, who knew that they put sugar water in the coffee? When you say, "I want black coffee," you need to specify, no sugar water,
Hmm.
and it's like, "What?" Because now I can taste it.
Yep, absolutely. And just like how we were talking about putting salt in our coffee because it takes
Yeah,
the bitter out.
yeah.
A lot of the coffee houses, I can't. Depending on how they roast their beans, it
Mhm.
really creates that bitter and burnt, taste. So, yeah, even just coffee.
I
I
know.
mean, there's places that make a really good cup, right? But then there's others that it's like, oh man.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
But
hopefully, we're hoping we're not, and please don't mistake, Becky and I are not perfect, right? We've just had years of experience of going down this whole rabbit hole of a holiday that turns into a food binge and how to break the cycle, and we see it with our clients and our BNC members, and I'm not saying everybody's like that. I'm just saying we see that a lot, and we just thought it was a really good topic coming off of the 4th of July. We have another holiday coming up here in September, right? The 1st of
mhm,
September, Labor Day weekend. You can start thinking about it now. You can start planning that out. It's like, you know, that's the celebration, the end of summer. What are you doing? And you can start making those plans of something maybe different than what you always do, and change the mindset around it where you're not binging or you're not going off the rails for that family gathering or that friends gathering, or we're all going to sit around in the lake drinking. I mean, you can change that. So start thinking about that ahead of time, and of course, we invite you to come join the BNC community because it is free.
it is. Yep. We are offering the basic or the free tier membership for free. So if you end up you go to uh, bncommunity.com, it will pop up that it's an $18 group, but use the coupon code free and it will process that for free for you. You can come join us in the meetings. We have a meeting following this over there, and then we have several meetings throughout the week as well. I think there's like 10 or 12 of them total for the week. So definitely, jump in, join us over there. We would love to see you and love to support you.
Absolutely. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. We don't. We do this out of, because we love what we do. We love to give tips on healing the whole body, but the algorithms and all that stuff, it helps with all of that. That when you like and subscribe and share if you seen a past podcast that we've done, share it with your friends, and invite them to come join us every Monday evening at 7 p.m. Central, and we will be back again next week.
Sounds good. Everyone, enjoy your day.